Hey, back at the water cooler, and I am so excited to be back here today I'm going to start with Casey, who's back at the water cooler again. Repeat, if people haven't seen Casey at the water cooler before, she is one of the co-founders of Vital Voice Training. I want to say Broadway, the Oscars, all sorts of stuff, talent extraordinaire, and working with all sorts of amazing women entrepreneurs, and has amazing podcast, Voice Is. So all worth listening to. Good to see you, Casey.
Oh, it's so good to be here with you, Kelly.
And new at the water cooler, my pal Dalia, new program manager at Microsoft. You were formerly at JetBrains. We were connected through Cassidy Williams, who has been here at the water cooler. So good to have you here, Dalia.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here today.
So we've got an interesting question, and I'm going to give a little more background on this one, the water cooler. Any secrets for managing a diverse team? And I know the question is coming in from someone who is, I want to say, a gender minority within the business, but by sexual orientation and skin color, not in the minority. And I would say the business is primarily executive roles filled with, pale and male, and someone very much concerned with bringing in talent and diversifying the team she's managing, because the customer base for her business unit is diverse. So part of the secrets for managing a diverse team is, with that background, there's been a little bit of friction. And I think it's one of those things where we can be doing the right thing, but not preparing ourselves and our team for success in that. All right, take a big gulp. All right, you know what, Dalia? You want to dive in? You're new here at the water cooler. We'll let you go. Like, your thoughts and just whatever you're thinking.
I have lots of thoughts on this. So just a little bit of background about me. I am a woman in tech, so already minority there. I'm also Arab and Muslim, so I have other background that makes me more of a minority in my workplace. And I've had situations where I've had great managers that have really supported me in the workplace, and sometimes managers that haven't been as inclusive or as supportive as other managers. So from a receiving end, I've experienced like really great support and really inclusive environments, and sometimes not as inclusive environments. I've also been on the leading end. So I've been a developer lead, and I've made it my mission to cultivate an inclusive environment. So I've dealt with some of those challenges as well. So I do want to talk about a little bit about like what has worked for me, and see what we can go with that. So a few things that came to mind was, first thing is to realize that conflicts are going to happen. And the question is, how are we going to handle them? It's not that we should avoid the conflicts. It's how are we going to handle conflicts when they come up? So one of the main things is establishing a way to provide feedback. One of my favorite ways that we as a team had feedback was this concept of retrospectives that we have in the tech field, where we meet every 2 weeks and we discuss what went well, what didn't go well. We do suggested action, all that stuff. A lot of times it starts kind of, the first time we did it, everyone was very polite and no one wanted to talk a lot about like what went wrong. So a lot of times I needed to start by what I didn't do so well and ask for suggestions. I needed to start by being vulnerable.
Modeling.
I think that's really important for leaders and managers to do, to say, hey, I'm vulnerable too. I'm really interested in growing. What's some of the suggestions you have? And I think as I've done that more and more, other folks are like, oh, it's okay to make mistakes. We're all in here together. We have this. I think it's really important to have a growth mindset about it. It's more about we're all helping each other up, and we're all gonna learn together and all those things. So that's
it's
one.
almost like, I'm going to say that it's almost taking like the mistake and the failure, like in terms of creating a dialogue within your team, and within a diverse team, so there's not finger pointing, and it's almost taking like the mistake and the error and like giving it its own little, like, it sits here and we can talk about it, and it's not pointing. That's what it's feeling like, not pointing at a person. Casey's been nodding away, and like both of us could be like bobbleheads with every thing Dalia is saying. It's like,
Yep.
But let me get Casey in here, and then I'm going to step out of the way and let you two keep going, because I know, Dalia, you've got a list.
Oh, there's so many. If I were talking to this person in person, I would have so many follow-up questions. Like, what kind of discord are we talking about? Where are you noticing it? Is this coming from the people who are, let's call them, closer to whatever the norm is in this company, who are feeling like people are getting jobs because they're special? Is the discord coming within a meeting situation where people aren't feeling like their voices are being heard? I want to tackle it. I have a couple of lenses on this conversation right now. I have the lens of a white woman, which I think is just very important to name. Like, I have certain markers of diversity in certain settings, and I have a lot of markers of privilege. The other lens that I'm coming to this with is a communication coach. And so I think about communication culture all the time. I want to point out a couple of things that Dalia is doing that I think are so fundamental and need to be pointed out. She is modeling the kind of communication culture that she wants to see by purposefully being vulnerable and showing that it is okay to make mistakes. Because what I see over and over again is companies who say all the right things. They say, we want diverse people here. We want diverse opinions. We want all voices to be heard. We want people to feel that they can bring their full self to work and be authentic. They say the good things, and then what's happening in practice is showing people that that's not actually the whole story. So we have to create very intentionally the communication culture that we want to see. Otherwise, we're not walking the talk. Like, it's not actually happening. And people know, people adjust, and people see. So that is like a baseline thing. Create the kind of culture that you want to see intentionally every day. And don't be afraid to continually audit and improve it. It's not a set it and forget it thing. Culture is just not that, especially communication culture. The other thing that I wanted to point out is the idea of discomfort. You were talking about conflict, right? So conflict is inevitable. It is inevitable whenever you get a bunch of smart people in a room together, which is hopefully what we're doing in team environments, getting a bunch of smart people with big ideas in a room together. We're going to get friction. And friction is something that we can either treat, as my Midwestern upbringing would treat it, as something that is very uncomfortable and to be shied away from. Or we can treat it as something that like is no big deal and people should just get over it. Like, everybody can just say whatever they want and we're not worried about consequences. We're not worried about how people feel. Like, we're just honest here. Well, that's a whole other side of things.
That's like being a bully. I'm just saying.
Totally.
That's like bully behavior. Anyway, go back.
I think people have this idea of radical candor that I think is a good idea in theory. But again, in practice, what it means is that some people get to be really powerful and other people just have to take it. So, okay, it's a really long-winded way to get to discomfort. Discomfort is a part of being human, period, end of story. It happens, right? It's a physical response that we have. And discomfort in and of itself, I would say, I would not attach discomfort to morality. Like, it is not good or bad that you are uncomfortable in this communication situation. It's what you do with it that matters. Are you turning your discomfort inward, like telling yourself like, oh, like this means that I don't have a right to be in this room, or this means that people don't like me, or this means that that my idea is bad, or this means that I need to shut down? Or are you turning it outward? This means that these people are attacking me and I need to attack them back, or I need to establish my dominance here. Like, you have to start to clock your own reactions to your discomfort, and so that you can interrogate them and figure out how to do better with your discomfort. And I will stop now. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Oh,
I will pull it out later.
Oh no, this is like so good, and it's reminding me of a conversation I had, and I got to connect you with Laura. Laura Hodgson, her business partner is Stacey Abrams. They just got the book Level Up. The two of them, though they are, Georgians and committed to that state, they are, opposite ends, I want to say in some of their outlook, but they also know that, hey, we can approach problems differently. We respect and share the same values. We may look at a different path in business on how to reach an outcome. Therefore, because of respect and values, we can tackle the conflict. Anyway, Dalia,
I really like the discomfort point. I really like Casey's point about discomfort, because a lot of times you can tell that someone handles discomfort better than others. So, for example, like it's a telling thing about a manager. If I bring up my first conflict, whether or not they're going to handle the further conflicts very well. So if I've gone to a manager and I was concerned about something that was said that was inappropriate or something like that, if they're dismissive or they get defensive right away, from a minority perspective, I'm like, oh, okay, so they seem like they're not going to handle this well. Maybe I'll just kind of keep it to myself. On the other hand, if they were very receptive, they listened really well, they handled it really well, those are the best relationships with managers I've had. I've had instances where a manager actually said something that was very inappropriate from a religious perspective. And afterwards, he apologized really, really deeply. And we had a conversation about it. And it was a very good, I think it solidified my trust in him as a manager, because he was able to correct the course of action and move forward. And I appreciated that instance so much, because a lot of times people would have gotten defensive or said like, oh, like, I'm sorry, let's just kind of move on. And I really appreciated him kind of seeing it as, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It's not tied to your morality. I really like Casey's point about the morality thing. It doesn't mean you're a bad person if you made mistakes. It will mean you're a bad person if you make the person that was wronged feel worse about what has happened to them. That's the line that you don't want to be crossing. And I've been in those situations where I've said something bad and I've been embarrassed, and I had to stop to say, hey, it's not about me right now. It's about how can I correct or rectify the mishappenings. And I've had one of my team members say, hey, you said something and I didn't feel really great about it and I felt really bad. And instead of like kind of feeling like a victim, I said, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm going to be watching this in the future, and here's the actions I'm going to take so I can avoid it in the future. Thank you very much for trusting me enough to come to me and tell me these things. Saying that to someone after they've brought up a problem will mean a lot to them, because it tells them that it's a safe space. It's okay to bring up your concerns. We'll talk about it. I won't get defensive. We'll talk about it. I value you as a person, and we'll resolve this problem.
Accountability. Oh my gosh, why is that so radical? Just being accountable.
Yes.
Well, I mean, sometimes we don't learn these skills in a like managing teams. We don't learn these skills except for by making mistakes or by osmosis, and that depends on who we're being managed by.
Yes. And go ahead.
No, keep going.
I do want to mention skills, because these things are not just kind of like things that you can't help or is just natural or whatever it is. No, these things you can cultivate. So
Yeah.
there's multiple things with diversity, and in general, just being a leader. One is conflict management. One of the best books that one of my managers suggested was Crucial Conversations, and it talks about how to talk in a high stakes environment, how to keep it constructive, all those things. It really helped me. I listened to the book. You can read the book. Highly recommend books like that talk to you about how to have those conversations. Any book about emotional intelligence,
Yes.
that is so important. Anything about empathy. I think empathy is something that is so important. Some of my best managers weren't the one that were like the most technically skilled or the most smart people or whatever. It's the people that sat down, listened to everything I had to say, tried to understand me, and then try to offer solutions or talk through things. I've had folks, I really appreciated when my managers have said, hey, how can I support you during Ramadan? I'm like, hey, someone recognizes I'm fasting, and they like it's so great to just not feel like I'm in this by myself, and my manager supports me and wants to be there for me. And I've had wonderful managers that have supported me through fasting and Ramadan and all that stuff. And sometimes with my, when we're talking about burdening, a lot of times you don't want to be asking your employee all the questions that you can be finding out about in Google. Like, I don't mind answering basic questions about Ramadan. It's not a problem for me. But some other folks are like, oh my goodness, can you Google it first and then come talk to me? Like, maybe how do you practice? Like, what are some, talk to me about it a little bit, but just a little bit research before you go in. Like, don't burden the person in front of you so much to explain everything to you. But for me, and you can tell the person that are open, like, oh, I'll answer all the questions. Me, I'm like, I'll answer all the questions. Like, please ask me anything, blah, blah, blah. You can tell the other people that are just kind of like, hey, I just want to be supported and not feel like just an outsider all the time. Gauge, get to know your person. They're still just a unique human being with unique needs. A lot of times asking and not making assumptions goes a very long way.
I heard something the other day that I loved. Thaler Picard said it during there was a great workshop on difficult conversations. She said, allow everyone to be as magnificently complex as you are. And I was like, yes, because I think, one of the things that happens, and I see people deal with this in a couple different ways, like there's whatever the norm is here, whoever we see as the norm. And then there are the people that are outside the norm. Now, and let's name it. Typically in the American business world, still the norm is a white man, middle-aged, educated, etc. So at straight, cisgendered, all of those things. So once you step outside of that normal box, people start to make a lot of assumptions about you, or they start to see you as representative of whatever marker you have. Like your actions either fit in with my idea of how an Arab woman acts, or they don't fit into my idea of how an Arab woman acts. And that is confusing, right? I would recommend everybody read the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He confronts a lot of really, really interesting brain science around bias and like why it's hardwired into us, right? We're hardwired to create stories. We're hardwired to seek out people who are like us. And that's not a bad thing, but it means that confronting our own bias is like expensive to our brains. Mm-hmm. Our brains are only really, like, our highest goal all the time is survival. It's to survive. And things that are tiring for our brain, therefore, we want to avoid because we need energy to survive. So like knowing that this stuff takes work and takes commitment is so important. Knowing that your tendency is going to want to be to put people in categories and boxes, and that you have to work to take them out of it. And I think curiosity is the thing that makes a difference. I brought this up in our last thing. I'm like on a curiosity kick right now, but like curiosity versus judgment.
Right.
And I think that's a much better replacement. I'm seeing a lot of particularly Black women push back on something right now that I think is so important to talk about, which is like, just assume that everybody has good intentions. Well, that ends up putting a lot of burden on people who are continually experiencing microaggressions. Like, you have to forgive me because I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Well, you know, we can have a really complicated conversation about intent versus impact, but like, as opposed to giving everyone the blanket of advice of just assume good intentions, why not give everybody the blanket advice of stay curious before you leap to judgment, ask clarifying questions, interrogate your own discomfort to see where it might be coming from. Are you uncomfortable because you think someone's calling you a bad person or a racist or a sexist or whatever, as opposed to just pointing out a single action that was uncomfortable for them? Like, how can we stay in that purposeful, if a little bit exhausting, place of curiosity? That's where productive conversations happen.
Yeah. I'm thinking on this, and anyone who's just sort of finding us in their stream at the moment, in the water cooler today, we're talking about secrets for managing a diverse team. And this came in from a reader who was doing that and found themselves in a situation that was creating some discord. And that might have been with a diverse team navigating a non-diverse environment outside their team, or it could have been the non-diverse outer environment somehow being at odds. I want to say got their knickers in a twist about this one group being highly diverse. I'm thinking about the study from Google, their project, was it Project Aristotle, where they set out to find, you know, what made a perfect team. And they were thinking like one engineer, one MIT grad, like, you know, and what they found was it was, you know, there was no, the only recipe, you know, kind of list in the, was that these very diverse teams had created psychological safety. Yep. So I think that's some of what we're hitting on here between the best practices that Dalia started with and the things you're talking with about, Casey. But Dalia, jump in, this whole idea, like what are some more of the best practices like around creating psychological safety, so that we realize that we are not being attacked or criticized or overlooked or belittled. And I'm doing this because it can, you know, it's all sides.
Yeah. I love that question, because that's one thing that, you know, when I became team lead, I felt like that wasn't there as much, because I personally felt like, you know, is it okay to ask questions? Is it okay to, you know, all this stuff? And building that is not a like, oh, do this, do that, do this. It's more of like, understand each person in your group first. I think we don't want to just talk in groups. We also want to be talking one-on-one. I feel like it's really important to establish trust as a leader or a manager with each person on your team, so that they know and you can start establish that trust. And then within and ask yourself, when you're bringing up issues, should this be brought up in a group setting? Should that be brought up in a one-on-one? I tend to be a praise in public, criticize in private kind of person. A lot of times, if we're going to have a conversation that's going to be embarrassing, the question is, does this really need to be brought up in a group? If it's a situation where we need to be one-on-one, let's do it one-on-one and then establish kind of that trust and relationship. But within a group, to establish that safety, I think it's going to be really important to ask yourself, when someone brings up something critical or when things get crucial, and that crucial conversation book talks about that, what happens to you? A lot of times it's either a fight or flight response. And you need to like really kind of slow everything down and kind of establish, okay, what's happening right now and what do I need to do to make sure this environment is safe and no one is starting to attack and no one is starting to want to leave. Because when people get quiet, that means the safety is being threatened. I love that book for that, because it really talks about that intensely. But a lot of times it's, how do you respond to conflict? If someone brings up something, being very respectful, listening. If someone is, especially if someone is being vulnerable and saying, here's my experience, listening, not interrupting, not getting defensive, kind of taking a breath, sometimes just taking a break and just taking a breath, and then responding with empathy, empathy, just responding with empathy. And then from there, you can figure out, okay, what is the right next course of action, and keep practicing that. It's not going to be a one-time thing. It's going to be established over time. Some of the best feedback I've gotten from my team members was, I felt like I didn't come out of my shell until we established safety in this team. And that was so incredibly touching, because it took months and I didn't know if it was happening. And that's one thing I want to encourage managers is, don't feel like it's just going to happen from day one. It's just going to be one after the other. You're just kind of establishing trust over and over and over.
It probably feels like 2 steps forward, 1 back, 2 steps forward, 1 back, 2. Anyway, Casey.
Well, yeah, because trust is hard to establish and easy to break. It's very fragile. And so, I see a lot in the coaching industry, people like walking into a room, into a workshop and like declaring it a safe space. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. You can't just declare something safe, because again, we're not taking into account people's different life experiences and their different nervous system reactions, like what you're talking about, fight or flight. I mean, that's the same thing with discomfort. Am I turning it inward or am I turning it outward? Like, am I letting it make me run away or making me attack? So, Julie and I launched our first group course last year, and it was so exciting. We very specifically wanted it to be a small group of people, and we worked so hard to make sure that we were not just attracting a bunch of late 30s, early 40s white women like us. Like, we have very, and I'm so proud to say that our demographic so far of the 3 cohort, we are actually 50% women of color. We have all ages. It's been such an incredible ride. And that diversity in the room makes the discussion so much richer. But what we were very conscious of from the beginning is like, how do we establish that psychological safety? Because we're getting into some like pretty serious stuff, like everything that makes you the communicator that you are, right? So we started with session agreements that we created as a group together. We established a means for accountability and communication. We make it abundantly clear as often as we can that, like, if something makes you uncomfortable, you can speak up. If something makes you uncomfortable, you can opt out. The power of saying no, thank you. Like, these are but we have to demonstrate it, and we have to make it happen over and over again so that they trust us. Otherwise, again, it's just like this thing that you say, and then you don't actually do what leads to people trusting you. So, I mean, this, I think, in a work environment, we keep coming back to over and over again, the idea of communication core values. So we as individuals have communication core values, the way that we want to be and be seen, what we consider polite and rude, what we consider to be powerful or weak. But then we also have group communication core values that we develop over time. And if we don't communicate about them, everybody's just going to intuit them. And then you feel like you're playing a game of like, am I fitting in or am I not fitting in? Like, the more we can make the implicit explicit, I think culturally, the better it is for everyone, because then everyone can engage with it, critique it, and continue to make it better.
Yeah. Wow. Woof. The 2 of you, this is like amazing. All right. So I'm aware of the time that we're hanging out at the water cooler, and I like to treat these things like we were standing in the office together with our coffee now getting cold, going, shit, gotta get back. God, boss is gonna see us just hanging out here at the water cooler as opposed to like doing our work. There's way more to continue on this conversation. So we're going to have to come back and keep going on it at some point. If folks watching this have questions that you would like us to address at the water cooler, there's where you send it in. If you've got feedback on this one, you say, but I need Casey and Dalia to answer this. Send it in to me so we can all get back here and keep hashing away on all of this. But before we go, you can repeat of a resource you've already mentioned, or something that, you think that someone like, all right, these women are speaking my tune. What's a resource, something that could help them, like, starting today?
Minda Hartz and Ruchika. I can't think of how to pronounce her last name right now. These two women are doing incredible, vital, necessary work in the DEI world.
Yes.
And Christina Blacken, Narrative Intelligence. Follow these women. They're incredible.
Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna say read the memo, read Inclusion on Purpose.
Yep.
If you're a woman who looks like Casey or me, read Allyship. That's another extraordinary book, because sometimes as women we're in the minority, and sometimes we need the ally, and sometimes we're the majority and we need to be that ally. So there's another one, and I'll also put links in the chat on all of this. Dalia.
Yeah, for me, I think just like I mentioned, Crucial Conversations, other books that Casey mentioned. The other thing I would recommend is, if you're on social media at all, kind of watch who you follow and see if they're all the same demographic, and if they are, try to diversify your follow list and get perspective from different people. That has helped me the most, because before I used to be just a 9-to-5 developer, never kind of checked anything. And then once I got more involved in Twitter, for example, I would follow different people that had different concerns that I never knew existed, never understood. And it really helped me understand some of the challenges that other folks that are not from my background are experiencing, and empathize with them. So if you're following folks on social media, expand your group a little bit more, seek out folks from different backgrounds, and just get all that perspective, and do realize that diversity isn't just a nice to have thing. It's like, oh, you were being PC. No, it brings a lot of value. It makes our products better, but it also makes us better human beings. So definitely there's a lot of value there. Expand your network. I think that would be a really positive thing to do.
Yeah. And hey, lots of opportunities and ways to do that. So we'll continue this conversation. But now we'll say, bye-bye from the water cooler. And thank you both, Casey, Dalia, again, for being here and sharing in this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. It's always a pleasure, and very nice meeting you, Casey.
Nice to meet you too.
All right. See you both again soon.
See ya.